Tensions have deepened in the Middle East after Iran launched 180 missiles towards Israel. As thousands of sirens sounded across the country and civilians rushed for shelter. This comes after Israel killed Hezbollah's top commander Hassan Nasrallah, and Iran had warned Israel on retaliation. The Israeli military said most of the missiles were intercepted with US help, but that were a small number of hits. It accused Iran of a dangerous escalation and warned of consequences. Before Iran's attack, Israel had landed a series of devastating blows in recent weeks against the leadership of Hezbollah in Lebanon. It then ratcheted up the pressure on the Iran-backed terrorist group, which has been firing rockets into Israel since the war in Gaza, which began by launching a limited ground incursion in southern Lebanon. Israel is fighting a war on 7 fronts with Iran's proxies. So now the question arises here, if UK and US, who benefit most from the Iran-Israel war, what will they be doing? And if Iran is behind Hezbollah, who's behind Iran? Is it Russia? How does Iran manage to evade sanctions once again? In fact, some of these sanctions very recently were eased up. Who helps Iran fund these proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas? Who has the most leverage over Iran to de-escalate? These are some of the big questions that we will be asking our guest today, Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian, with us on the program. Group Captain Dr. M.J. Augustine Vinod, former fighter pilot, MiG-21, is with us on the show as well. Rohan Gunaratna, Strategic Affairs expert, with us on the program. And last but by no means the least, my very dear friend Pathik Ritpayan, International Affairs expert, joins us on the show as well. Welcome everyone. Professor Nalapat, I'll begin with you, sir. That's the big question, sir. Iran is helping these proxies, but who is helping Iran? So far, the support or the pat on the back that Iran has received from Russia seems to be just optics. But the fact of the matter is, what's going on over here? Some people accuse even the United States for Iran getting so strong. It was the Obama administration which let up a lot of these sanctions, which allowed Iran to welcome a lot of money, billions of dollars, which have been disseminated to these proxies.
Well, I'd like to say, Vineet, that that there's no question that what Obama did regarding his deal with Iran has basically had a negative impact on the Democratic Party, because today one of Donald Trump's main campaign lines is the Democratic Party is weak on Iran, and he points to this particular Obama-era decision regarding the Iran nuclear deal and money transfer to Iran, etc., etc. I would like to point out that Russia is fully committed to the Ukraine war. A lot of money is being spent on that. So if you're saying that Russia and Russian entities are funding Iran, question is who's funding Russia? Check and see who's buying so much of the Russian oil and other resources. I think you'll find the obvious answer. But I want to say, Vineet, that I must confess that my young friend Pathikrit seems to have been right when he talked about the hypocrisy of some of the Western countries, for simple reason that what we now know is that there were absolute money transfers to two notified terror organizations, Hezbollah and Hamas. And those transfers went by unimpeded through entities in Lebanon. And that is, in other words, the betting was that these proxies would not attack the West, including Israel, which of course the proxies did. And the point is, what is all this talk about democracy? Where is democracy in Gaza? Where is democracy in Lebanon when an armed group has outsized influence on the governance of that state and basically bends the Lebanese state to its will? So all this talk of democracy, frankly, has been shown to be utter hypocrisy. So far as the Lebanon matter is concerned. And very frankly, any transfer to any terrorist group anywhere in the world is a crime, a criminal act, a crime against humanity, and needs to be prosecuted and dealt with very severely. And I certainly hope that now the FATF, I was talking about, frankly, China, not just Russia behind Iran. I think FATF needs to show that it has got some moral force. And the only way it can do that is by living up to the reason why it was set up in the first place. And that reason was to stop terror funding, something in which I'm sorry to say FATF does not seem to have succeeded. Thank you, Vineet.
All right, Pathikrit. The hypocrisy of the Western world is apparent here, and Professor Nalapat also cited one of your statements from the past when it comes to Iran and how the Americans have also been not partly but majorly responsible for giving this kind of a confidence to Iran.
Vineet, let me first acknowledge Professor Gunaratne is in the program. I happened to be one of his students in 2010-11 in S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. I used to attend his classes. It's an honor. Secondly, let me tell you one thing. There was something called the Project Cassandra. Project Cassandra was an investigation by the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States on the money laundering and the narcotics route, or being used by Hezbollah to actually make millions of dollars of money, hundreds of millions, through the cartels which are based in South America and Central America. Unfortunately, the Project Cassandra, which was on the verge of actually reaching the top echelon of Hezbollah, was stopped by the powers that be in the higher authorities of the United States during the Obama administration. So Project Cassandra failed, and the money laundering activities and everyone who was involved as part of Hezbollah continued with that, laundering of money and making hundreds of millions of dollars from that narcotics trade. Secondly, let me tell you also this. When it comes to Iran, it is true the sanctions did have an impact on their air force, on their navy, but in the area of loitering munitions, in the area of short-range ballistic missiles, they did have made quite a bit of progress. Okay, and that cannot be denied. But if you see the October 1 attack, the kind of guidance systems that was used to reach nearly almost the Mossad headquarters or the Neva Team Air Base, that means that it is not just in the area of the propulsion systems, in the area of the guidance or something, Iran was being helped by somebody. And I would not be surprised if there is a Russia angle. I'll tell you the reason. Over the last few weeks, there has been a considerable amount of deployment which is happening from Russia into Iran, planes coming, possibly with air defense systems and surveillance systems, because Russia is looking this as an opportunity to hit back the same way which US has been doing in case of the Ukraine-Russia war in terms of arming Ukraine to fight Russia. So Russia may not have a direct animosity with Israel, but given that dynamics of geopolitics today, because there is a possibility of United States helping Israel, I will not be surprised if the Iranians are being helped by the Russians, because the criticality of the INSTC corridor is very important for Russia. So they will not allow Iran to go down. Secondly, of course, Iran has been supplying a lot of weapon systems in reciprocation to Russia. So sophisticated technological aspect of the warfare, if Iran is being held by Russia, it cannot be denied. It cannot be completely ignored. Does Russia have a leverage? I don't know that, because they may not be as much in the talking terms with the Israelis. The only country which can have a talking term, which is in talking terms with both the countries, is India. But I think the issue of negotiation is a far-fetched idea right now. We don't know what's going to happen next. So far as being turning a blind eye, it is not just as Professor Nalapat mentioned about Hezbollah. If you look at Hamas, the Hamas leadership was based in Qatar. Qatar has been one of the strongest allies of United States. It was all open and shut case. Qatar has been putting in money into the hands of Hamas. It's all well known. And yet nothing was done. So yes, there are elements who want the pot to keep boiling when it comes to Middle East. My last statement, in Israel, if you remember, Vineet, this was stated by Joyita a few days back in your program, that Iran acts as an octopus, and Hamas, Hezbollah, these are tentacles which have been used to actually create problems, not just for Israel, but also the Sunni Arab states like Saudis and United Arab Emirates. It's not something new, but I think America has not been as critical, as lethal, as vindictive, as vengeful towards Hezbollah as it has been in case of, say, Al-Qaeda or other organizations. So this was an avoidable situation, what happened in October 7 and thereafter. if Hezbollah had been taken to task much before, but it did not happen. Well, there are factors, there are players who are involved, believes that conflicts must go on, but United States and of course the Democrats cannot shave their hands off what is happening. I think at any point of time, Hezbollah is a bigger threat. Houthis are a bigger threat to supply chains and these things than the things that is happening between Russia and Ukraine. That was avoidable, but this was not. We haven't got the kind of support from the West on this to sort these issues out as was expected. And that's why a lot of questions are raised. Back to you, Vinod.
Mr. Aaron Levarko, who served in the Israeli Defense Forces for 9 years, is also an Israeli journalist, joins us on the program. Mr. Levarko, welcome to the show. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you, and I can hear the distinguished other guests.
Thank you so much for joining us. There's a very pretty scene behind you. And of course, we are not here to talk about the pretty scene behind you. We are here to talk about, the complicated, the serious scenes which are unfolding in the Middle East right now, courtesy of Iran and the attack that took place day before yesterday. In your opinion, how is this menace that Iran has so sophisticatedly created, to attack and kill Israelis is turning out to be, and what do you think is going to be the impact of the sheer force and penetration that Israel has been able to demonstrate to Iran in the last few days?
Big questions. Well, in our modern generation, we only need to go back as far as 1978, 79, the Islamic Revolution. And when the Shah of Iran was overthrown, the Ayatollah Khomeini rose up and he basically made it clear that he was planning on exporting radical Islam to the Western world. And when it happened, and I remember I was just a young kid, it was some pretty scary scenes. But if you fast forward it to 56, 57 years to today, they have had a strategy of patience. They have had a strategy of planting, because what happens is when Muslims immigrate to various parts of the world, for the most part, they are peaceful, loving people. But then the ayatollahs and the sheikhs and the imams, what they do is they fund the building of mosques in these places. Then after the mosques are built, they send their clerics and their theologians to come and teach from those mosques to the communities, to the Muslim communities, these nice, peaceful people. And then those people become indoctrinated, and then the masses grow. And so what's been happening is in the West, places like the United States and Europe, of course, the United States were called the big Satan. Israel, we are called the little Satan. And slowly, they have been achieving the success in their vision that started in the Islamic Revolution. And so we are seeing the fruit, partially the fruit of that. We're seeing it here in the Middle East. We see the proxies that have surrounded us, Israel, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Taliban, just to name a few. So we're seeing that. And of course they get their the oil-rich countries doing that. And then of course, as Professor Nalapat mentioned, the funding from the United States. Hard to believe how a democratic country like the United States, or rather I should say the Biden administration, because when you look at the difference from the Trump administration, they sanctioned, and those sanctions, as Mr. Payne pointed out, those sanctions were working. They were crippling the economy of the Iranians. But sadly, we have these this Biden administration, however you want to interpret the Biden administration, whether they are Marxist, whether they are funded or motivated by the deep state of the United States, that's up to the interpreter. But it's very frustrating, and people are unaware, uninformed, uneducated. And what's amazing to me is how the Iranians, when they started this call in 1978-79, no one has taken them serious. No one has done anything systematically. There have been some voices out there, like the Prime Minister of Holland, Geert Wilders. He saw it. He had the eyes to see, as Isaiah the prophet in the Bible says. Some people have eyes but they don't see, and ears and they don't hear. But he seemed to have eyes to see. And so these are just some of the ways that Iran have been able to achieve their goals, as well as corruption, internal corruption inside of Iran, where they have different classes of society, where people they are members not just of the government but of the IRCG, of the whole regime that want to fulfill the Islamic fundamentalist goal and vision, and that is to take over the Western world. So sadly, we're seeing some of the fruits of their patient, long-term goals. Over to you. Thank you.
Those are good points that you've made, Mr. Gunaratna. Your assessment of the situation, and we're forgetting one thing, that both these countries also boast of nuclear capabilities. They may be tacit in nature, they may be implied to a large extent, but the fact of the matter is that with Ukraine and Russia already unfolding for the worst in the last few weeks, you cannot have another escalation like this.
The conflict between Israel and Iran's proxies could very well lead Israel to attack Iran. Israel is likely to attack Iran's oil, gas, and other strategic targets in response to the most recent attack that Iran staged. Israel is likely not to attack Iran's nuclear and other capabilities until a new government comes to power in the United States. Most likely, they will wait until Trump is elected. But I would like to share with all of you that Iran's strategy is always to operate through proxies, and it has done so brilliantly, whether it is the Ansarullah in Yemen, whether it is the Hezbollah in Lebanon, whether it is the Islamic resistance fronts in Syria and in Iraq, and of course the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and Hamas, both in Gaza and the West Bank. We have also seen two other significant developments. That is, Iran has developed the capability to operate very effectively in building these proxies and sustaining these proxies over a long period of time. Of course, the Israeli security intelligence community, as well as Israel's operational capabilities, in a very short period of time was able to disrupt, degrade the Lebanese Hezbollah capabilities inside Lebanon. But of course, the Lebanese Hezbollah is a global terrorist organization. I would say that compared to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State or ISIS, the most resourceful threat entity globally is the Lebanese Hezbollah. So it is very likely that the Lebanese Hezbollah will transit into a phase of global terrorism in the coming months and coming years. I also would like to share with all of you that the world should do everything possible to prevent a nuclear war, because Iran has developed a very significant nuclear capability. North Korea has been testing Iranian weapons. What Iran doesn't have is currently a launch mechanism, but Iran's partnership with other countries, with other entities, is very likely to make Iran fully capable of mounting a nuclear attack in the coming months and coming years. And that should be the main concern of the superpowers, so that they will all work together to fight this threat.
Professor Nalapat, what about countries like Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, and Turkey and Egypt, who form, the borders of Israel? How likely are they also to be involved in this larger conflict? They definitely do view Israel as an oppressor in this region.
Well, I'd like to say that unfortunately, Western diplomacy during the Biden administration has been very short-sighted. It has continued to focus on the Atlantic, continued to focus on Europe, and has frankly ignored any non-European territory. Even today, when you look at the resources and the weapons being sent to Israel, and you look at the resources and weapons being sent to Ukraine, there's no comparison between Ukraine and Israel, even though Israel is way more important to US security and to global security and to security of not just the Indo-Pacific but the Atlantic, as Dr. Gunaratne correctly pointed out, through the factor of the terror outlets and the need to stamp them out. So I'd like to say very clearly, Vineet, that I think it's very important for the world to recognize this danger and to understand that terrorism is a global phenomenon and it has to be fought in a global manner. You can't have a terrorist whom you ignore and a terrorist whom you encourage, and above all, you should never allow access to money. One of the what happened after 9/11, one of the good things that happened after 9/11 was a lot of the terror funding was stopped. And as a consequence, terror attacks on the United States came down to almost zero levels. Terror funding is the root of the strength of terrorism, and that has to be attacked. And if the FATF is to live up to the ideals for which it was set up, FATF needs to act and act speedily and comprehensively. Vineet.
Pathakrit, what about countries like Pakistan here, who very vividly and unequivocally support, the cause of Palestine and Iran, and it's a nuclear country. What stops them from, selling these nukes at a cheap price to Iran, considering the fiscal difficulties that Pakistan has been facing?
So let me tell you one thing, Vinit. It's a very complex situation. Shias get persecuted in Pakistan on a regular basis, unfortunately. However, the regime in Pakistan...
Every minority gets persecuted in Pakistan.
No, definitely the reason is what I'm saying is that the Pakistani government will not say anything against the Iranian government in the present situation, because it is such an emotive issue. There has been so much of indoctrination against Israel in the whole of the region, that anyone who wages a war against Israel gets a cult-like status. And so no Islamic country will actually speak against Iran for fear of uprising in their own countries against the regime. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen. If the war between Israel and Iran intensifies, God forbid, the same United States would then use Pakistan against Iran instead of funding more other countries who have been steadfastly fighting against terrorism. You would see Pakistan will have a newfound place of importance in the eyes of the United States. Whether it will help them or not, I don't know, because the general emotive angle of the people will be in favor of Iran. But Pakistan will find it as a great opportunity to salvage more money in the name of war on terror, and then eventually doing exactly what it has been doing for the last so many decades. So I think the West if it is very serious about fighting against terror, then it cannot have this kind of a piecemeal strategy that I'll use it against that, I will use them against this. It has to have a holistic approach. That is lacking. Today, let me tell you, the situation is so complex. Even those Sunni Arab states who have been against Houthi, who abhor Hamas for its allegiance to Muslim Brotherhood, who have a problem with Hezbollah and the Shiite cleric regime of Iran, they will be very measured in their protest against Iran, because they know the issue is so emotive, it can create uprising in their own countries. And that's why you see Saudi Arab and United Arab Emirates, who have faced this war against Houthis for almost a decade, their critical infrastructures have been targeted in the same manner by the Houthis as Israel is facing now. And yet you see they are very measured in terms of their criticism against Iran, because Iran is now projecting that I am the only country in the whole region who is waging a war against Israel. So all of this has happened because United Nations, first of all, has no definition of what terrorism stands for. The West, for everything that they say against, that they are willing to fight war on terror, have been extremely selective in its approach. For a country like India, Prime Minister Modi said very clearly, terror has no place. He supported the actions against Hezbollah, as it seems. But situation is so complex today that it will be very difficult for most countries, even when they tacitly agree that, these radical tentacles and their beehive must be dealt with. They will find it very difficult to come up and say, I stand and I support this country against that country. We would rather prefer not to have a conflict, because we don't know what shape this conflict is going to take. Nuclear weapons, terror attacks is just a day away, anytime. Terror attacks in the whole of Europe, United States, even India cannot be ruled out given the situation right now. And Iran has been very, very successful by its attack on Israel. It might not have an impact on Israel, but it has been very, very successful in terms of doing away with the sectarian differences and making everyone believe that they are the only ones who are fighting against Israel on behalf of Muslims. It may not be true, but that is the projection. So how you deal with it only will depend, how the next regime in United States have a perception about how to deal with terrorism.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.